And this is the session on treasurer, and it'll be run by Elliot Rittenberg, our district governor nominee. And I'm going to just turn it right over to Elliot.
Why don't we bring it up and let's get started. It's Saturday morning, and I'm sure everybody has other things that they'd like to be doing. So,
okay,
and that's great. We can go on to the next slide. Great. So today we'll talk about the role of the treasurer in the Rotary in a Rotary club. And just like any of the other officer and committee positions, it's an important role. It's a little bit different than some of the other roles in the club, in that as a treasurer, you're less visible on a day-to-day basis. You're not interacting the way, say, a club president or some of the other roles. But what you do in the background is just as important, if not more so, than some of the things that get done elsewhere, particularly because the things that you do as club treasurer come with real penalties and consequences attached to them by not Rotary police, but the real police. So it's important that we understand some of the obligations involved here. So today we'll cover the obligations and the missions of the treasurer, what the responsibilities are, how you protect your club and its funds. We'll talk about reporting requirements, both federal and state. We'll look at the Rotary dues structure, talk about budgeting and reporting, which are two important components of this position. And then we'll touch on a couple of miscellaneous things. We'll talk about the Rotary insurance program. We'll touch on 501c3s because our charitable organizations, because we get asked that question all the time. Mm-hmm. And part of that, we'll talk about the district charity fund, and then we'll point you towards some resources. So the treasurer, starting off, has really three primary obligations. When you assume the role, these are the things that need to be upmost in your mind. And the first is that you're responsible for the protection of member and donor funds. So that's a fiduciary responsibility, and as I said, it comes with obligations and consequences that transcend the club. You're also responsible for complying with federal and state reporting requirements and to maintain your club's good standing with Rotary International, which in our case means making sure the dues get paid on time. Next, please. Thank you. And so as we talked about these obligations that you have, they require you to be task and deadline oriented. There are due dates that you have to meet. There are forms that need to be completed, and errors and omissions and missed dates, they can have serious implications. I know one club where the federal tax return wasn't filed a couple of years ago, and they saw a bill for $3,600 show up this year because of the late filing or missed filing. That will go away. They'll be able to get an abatement on it, but those things happen and they're real if you're not paying attention. So next, please. So some of the responsibilities, they include maintaining the financial records, filing federal, state, and local tax returns, developing a budget with your president-elect before that person takes office, collecting dues for the club, district, and Rotary International. And when you're thinking about that, you want to think about generating your invoicing early. Your dues are due on July 1st, or you get your bill on July 1st and January 1st. But my experience has been that it can take anywhere from 3 to 6 months to collect all of the dues from members in your club. So you want to start that process early. And then once the funds are collected, you need to pay them to the district and to Rotary International. You need to take care of the invoicing and other club expenses from the day-to-day operations and events. And you need to maintain the club bank accounts, including separate bank accounts for any district or global grants that your club may be involved with. Next, please, Victor. You also need to be looking at the financial performance of club events. I can't tell you how many times I've been in situations where we've had great events and great committees managing those events, and you get to the end of the day and you add up all the receipts and expenses, and you've determined that you've actually lost money on it. So you guys, as treasurers, want to be involved in event planning to make sure that those events are run, in the manner that the club intends. You're providing regular financial updates to your board. And one of the more important things that you need to be able to do is to advise deviations from your current year budget. You're going to plan the budget with your board and with your club president. And the most important report that you can prepare, and we'll look at that in a minute, is a budget variance report. I plan to spend $8,000 on scholarships, and we actually spent 11. That's an important deviation that your club needs to know about. So those are basically the responsibilities. I think the last one is one I want to mention in particular, and that is you're responsible for training your successor. What you do, the knowledge that you gain as club treasurer is really an intimate form of knowledge of what goes on in your club. And it's important that we think about continuity as we move on to the next role we're going to play. So next one, please, Victor. We also need to look as treasurer at grant management, and there's an MOU or memorandum of understanding that your club signs with the district that then flows up to RI, and that memorandum outlines how funds are separated and how funds are treated and tracked when it comes to grants, and that becomes your responsibility as treasurer as the club engages in grants, whether district or global grant. So next one, please. So protecting member and donor funds. This is probably the most significant responsibility we have. And one of the things that we need to do is we need to keep donor funds separated from operating funds. And clubs can do this in so many different ways. They can either use a single bank account and track the different balances within the account. It's better to have separate bank accounts for charitable funds versus operating funds, and a lot of clubs do that. There's no right or wrong way to do it, but it has to be done, and whatever method suits your form of operations is fine, as long as you have a consistent and repeatable method of tracking that. When it comes to grants, either district grants or global grants, you are required to have a separate bank account for the grant funds so that RI or the district can track the activity and make sure that it's consistent with the grant application and the grant reporting. You also might want to have a club finance committee to review your budgets, your disbursements, your profit and loss, your variances, and any changes to accounting practices so that it all doesn't fall on your shoulders. And you really want to try and appoint an assistant treasurer if you can, if you can find someone in the club to assume that role, both to help you when you're out of town or are unable to complete your responsibilities. You're signing checks, so there has to be somebody available to sign checks if you're out of town, and you need to keep that as a consideration, and also someone who you can train to step into your role if it becomes necessary, or to assume it once your term is over. One thing that I recommend that all treasurers do, and this comes from being a small business owner for decades, is keep copies of every single incoming check that you get. I don't care what the check is for. I don't care if it's a $2.23 cashback rebate from your credit card. Copy the check and put it in a notebook where you know where it is and where someone else does, because I can't tell you the number of times we've gone back and tried to figure out where did this money come from, or where did that money come from? And you can't get that off of a bank statement. It just isn't there. So, keep copies, and whether you keep them electronically or keep paper copies, it doesn't matter. But yeah, have that backup available to you. Of course, we're responsible for preparing tax returns. Depending on the size of the club and depending on the complexity of your operation, you may or may not need to use an outside accountant, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Victor, if we could go to the next one. Thank you. Couple of other recommendations. You'll want to require 2 signatures on checks exceeding a preset amount, whatever your club board is comfortable with. Some clubs say $500, some clubs say $1,000, some say $250, but wherever your comfort level is, just so that there's some accountability and oversight on large expenditures. You want to make sure you get those returns filed on time or request the appropriate extensions, and we'll talk about that in a moment. And then you want to make sure that you comply with any document storage and retention requirements, and that you have an organized storage system. Club Runner is one way to do that. There's all kinds of online file management systems where you can store documents, but put something in place that lives longer than your term, and that's something that someone within your club can access easily. The IRS guide for document retention is shown here, and basically they're saying the statute of limitations is 3 years after the date the return is due. So you want to keep your documentation for at least 3 years after it's filed. Next one, please, Victor. So talk about the federal reporting requirements. Your federal tax return is due the 15th day of the 5th month following year end. So in simple language, that's November 15th. Our year end is June 30th. So 5.5 months after that is November 15th. And that's when your tax return is due. And the return you need to file is some variant of what's called the Federal Form 990. And there are 3 versions of the 990. There's the 990N, which used to be the postcard. Now it's electronic, and it's for clubs where your revenue and receipts are less than $50,000. There's a 990EZ, which is a little bit more complicated form, but not too bad. And that's when your gross receipts are less than $200,000 and the assets of the corporation are under $500,000. And then there's the full up 990 form, which, if you have revenue in the club of more than 200K and assets of greater than 500K, then you file the 990, and those clubs probably will use professional guidance to do that. And there are a number of clubs that fall into that category. So next one, please. So what happens if you don't comply? I haven't looked at this one in the last year or so, but the last time I looked, the failure to file can result in a $20 a day penalty. So that's $7,300 a year. Penalties can also be imposed if the return contains incorrect information. And if a club fails to file for 3 years, they'll lose their tax exempt status and be subject to payment of income tax. And you don't want to go there. Next one, please. If you're going to be even 1 day late, file an extension. The extension is easy. There's no magic in submitting it. And it will save you a host of problems later on. A 6-month extension is allowed automatically. So if you file this IRS Form 8868, and when we send these slides out, all of these are hyperlinked, so you'll be able to click on them and get to this information. You file that form in, and you've got 6 months to file your return. Next one, please. So you have a separate set of requirements in Massachusetts. We have to file a Form PC, and that's due the same day, November 15th. And if you fundraise, if you go out to the public to solicit funds, you need to complete what's called Schedules A1 and 2 in Form PC that details your fundraising activities. And also you can file an extension the same way here if you're not ready to file on the 15th, but make sure that you do so and just send them a copy of your Form 8868 requesting the federal extension, and you'll automatically get an extension from the state. Next one, please, Victor. Annually, there's a $35 filing fee with the state for the club, as long as the revenue in the club is under $100,000. If it goes over 100K, it's $70. And if your revenue is in excess of 250K, then your filing fee goes to $125. And at that point, you need a CPA review to accompany your filing. All of this information in the forms, again, they'll be on these links when you get the slides, when we send them out. Victor, next one, please. So in Massachusetts, there's an annual report, and this is different than your tax return. This is something that is filed with the Massachusetts Department of Corporations Secretary's Office. You click on the link where it says on the bottom there, nonprofit corporation forms, and you go in and you basically list out who are the officers of the club, their addresses, and you send them $15, and that keeps them happy for another year. Next one, please. It's talking about dues. This is the Rotary responsibility we have, and here's what I think dues are going to look like in 2023. You get an invoice from the district twice a year on July 1st and January 1st for $25 each time. You'll get an invoice from RI for $71 per member this year, and it's divided in two, so it's $35.50 in July and January. And then these other charges are Rotarian Magazine, the Council on Legislation, that pays for the delegates to the Council on Legislation to travel and serve their terms. General liability and directors insurance are included here. So the total comes out to about $140 per member. And additionally, the district will include the per club charges for pets and pre-pets, if there are charges for pre-pets in the district invoice as well. NE Pets or Northeast Pets, I believe, is going to be $315 for the president-elect in the coming year. So that will be included on your club invoice. Next one, please. So both RI and the district sends their invoices twice a year. The balance is due when you get the invoice. And note that you can't make adjustments on the club invoice. So if anyone was here for the last seminar, you remember when Karen talked about getting those members updated before January 1 and July 1. And it's important because when you get your club invoice, you can't write on it, no, I only had 20 members, not 22. You have to pay the invoice. There's no adjustments once that thing is issued. And so that's important. And as I mentioned earlier, you want to consider sending those invoices out to your members in early June or even May, or early December or late November, to get your cash flow, so you're not fronting the cash to pay the dues to RI and the district, because it takes, in my experience, it can take some time to get everybody's money collected. Next one, please. So what happens if we don't pay our dues for RI? If you don't pay within 4 months, you'll get a letter of termination. And then there's a bunch of steps that you go through to become reinstated, including paying everything that you owe to Rotary, paying all the membership dues that continue to accrue during the time you're in suspension, a $30 per member reinstatement fee, and then you have to sign your life and firstborn children away that you're never going to do it again. So you don't want to get into that situation. Pay the dues on time and keep the folks in Evanston as our friends. So next one, please, Victor. So one of the most important things that we can do to help our clubs is in the budgeting function. Most people come into the treasurer position because they have some idea of financial management and have done something like this before in another part of their life. And this is where these skills become really valuable. We need to work with our board and our president-elect to develop a budget so that, by the time they take office, they know what they're going to be doing and what resources are available to them. We also need to work with our event chairs to make sure that the club activities meet budget expectations. And not saying that every event has to make money by any stretch of the imagination, but what we don't want is surprises. We can plan to lose money, but we don't want to do it and not know it. So, and then you want to prepare, a series of reports, including variance reports that show deviations from the budget. So if we can go to the next one, please. Here's this is kind of hard to see in this setting, but you'll get the slide with a copy of it. This is a budget form. On the top you have income, on the bottom you have expenses, and at the end you have how much is left over or how much you need to put back in. So it's not rocket science, but it's really, really important and really helpful in managing the club. Next one, please. And as I said, we have a number of reports we look at. Most clubs use QuickBooks or some QuickBooks-like program to track their finances. All of these tools have the same kinds of reports: profit and loss, balance sheets, P&L. But the most important one, I think, is this monthly budget variance. It's where you look at the budget you set and you compare it to what you've actually spent, and you figure out what the difference is, so you can make adjustments as you go through the year to keep your club in balance. Next one. Talk a little bit about Rotary's insurance program. Not that this is a primary responsibility for us as a treasurer, but it comes up all the time when we're planning events. People ask about insurance. So Rotary does have a general liability policy, which does extend down to the clubs. However, if you look at the language here, it says it protects clubs and districts against liability claims for bodily injuries to a third party or damage to a third party's property. So the important words that are not here is that Rotary's insurance does not protect Rotarians from injury, and it does not protect your club property. So you need your own insurance if that's a concern for you. A lot more detail available on their website. The directors and officers employment practices liability is basically, hold harmless insurance for club executives and club officers that allow you to make decisions without worry about repercussions and lawsuits from doing so. Next one, please, Victor. And the other question that comes up all the time that I think is important to address as treasurers is whether or not a 501c3 makes sense for your particular club. Many clubs won't engage in fundraising. Invariably, donors ask, is my donation tax deductible? And that depends on where the donation is going. So all Rotary clubs, when they're formed, are 501c4s, and that is a nonprofit social welfare organization. We're not subject to income tax. Our revenue is not taxable. But money that we receive from donors or other sources is not tax deductible to that donor when we're a 501c4. So many clubs opt to set up a 501c3, which is a charitable organization, and they run both the club and the 501c3 in parallel. The benefit of the 501c3 is that donations to that organization may be tax deductible. There's a bunch of rules that surround that, like, the 501c3 can't participate in any lobbying or political campaigns. There can't be any benefit to the, private interests, which means the members or officers. And in the end, it's not really a straightforward decision whether or not the club should form a 501c3, particularly in recent years where the tax laws have changed and the deductibility of contributions, such as to organizations like ours, isn't as widespread across the board as it used to be. I'm not an accountant and I don't fully understand all of the rules governing deductions right now, but what I do understand is that small deductions, the types of things that are now being rolled into the standard deduction that we all get on our tax returns right now, have eliminated some of the benefits. So our larger donors, our corporate donors, yes, they benefit from 501c3s, but you as a club need to determine how much of your fundraising will be impacted by the ability or non-ability to allow donors to claim that tax deduction. But there's a way around it, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So Victor, next one. So the other things about a 501c3 is, again, it benefits your fundraising because people in business can deduct, but it also creates another level of administration for you as club managers and club officers. It's an entirely separate corporation. So you need a separate board, you need separate bylaws, separate constitution. All of that stuff comes into play. It's like having a second club. And additionally, your external oversight, from IRS and Commonwealth of Massachusetts gets ramped up a notch when you're looking at a 501c3, because they're going to look at those returns closer than they are your 501c4 to make sure that they're in compliance. On-time filings are more essential. Penalties and fines are more severe, and it really requires a commitment to management. So we'll go to the next one. You also need a firewall between the 501c3 and your club. You can have clubs funds move from your club to the 501c3, but you don't want funds moving the other way. You don't want funds coming out of your charitable organization back into your club operating accounts, because that's the wrong way, and that will attract attention. So the other thing that you want to do is you want to have a separate treasurer, a separate board of directors if you can, and at the very least you want a separate treasurer for the 501c3 versus the club, so that there's no appearance or question of improprieties having the same person managing both funds. Next one, please. So I won't go through all of these individual steps. We'll send them out as slides, but here's what you would do to establish a 501c3. It's not all that hard to do. There's 3 or 4 forms you fill out. You send them to the IRS. You get a determination letter that says you're exempt, and then you apply to the state to get your ST2 certificate of exemption for sales tax. It takes about 2 months or so to go through the whole process. And if anybody's interested, I'm happy to help you walk through that. So next one. So for those clubs that don't want to deal with setting up a 501c3 or don't have the people or don't really have the need for it because the fundraising isn't tied to that, but have an occasion where they want to be able to accept donations which are tax deductible. What's a good example of that? Well, Ukraine is a great example of that. If you're a club and you want to collect funds from the community, but you don't have a 501c3, a lot of your community members are going to ask you, can I deduct this donation? And the answer to that is yes. And the way that you do it is we use the district charity fund. The district charity fund is a 501c3. It exists specifically for this purpose. And what you do is, as a club, you make a motion to the trustees of the district charity fund that says, the Rotary Club of Southborough wants to collect donations for Ukraine. We want to deposit those donations to the district charity fund, and we will then authorize you to disperse those funds to the Rotary Disaster Response Fund at a time and place to be determined. So you send a set of motions to the district charity fund that says something like that. Your donors write checks to the district charity fund and they get tax receipts from the district charity fund. So you get the benefit of the 501c3 without having to set up the corporation on your own for that purpose. So keep that in mind as you go forward with your fundraising efforts. It's a great tool. And a number of our clubs have figured out how useful it is and use it on a regular basis. So next one, please. So in closing, there's a number of resources that you can look to for more information. The Learning Center, as we talked about in the first seminar, is always a good place to start. There is a set of courses in the Learning Center under the club leadership banner that about your treasurer duties and responsibilities. It's a total of about an hour and a half worth of time to go through the 5 or 6 courses. And then if we can go to the next 2 slides, just flip through them. When you get these slides, you'll have these links. These are the links to all the forms that you need to file, where to look for the guidance about various issues we've talked about on the state and federal and Rotary websites. So that's all I got to say. And they taught me in salesman school, when I get to this point, I should shut up. So I'm going to do that and ask for questions. And thank you for taking time to go through the training this morning. And any questions, anything we can answer, please let us know.
I'll jump in with a quick one. Nice job, Elliot.
Thank you, Mark.
Could you repeat what you said about the insurance coverage, what it does not cover?
Right. So if you read the language on their page specifically states that the liability insurance that covers Rotary clubs covers covers injury and damage to third-party persons and third-party property. So it's specifically omitting Rotarians and property that we as Rotary clubs own.
Thank you very much.
Now, I'll make the comment that there may be more detail behind that, but we need to be aware that there are limitations and exclusions to that policy, and that when Rotary says, or when we say that there's insurance in place, it's not all covering comprehensive insurance that covers anything that can happen at an event. So, a lot of venues will require additional insurance or separate policies. So you just need to be aware that it is not an all-encompassing solution.
That's a great flag. Thank you.
Would you ask them if it covers Rotary boards and their board of directors?
The board is the insurance.
There is That is a separate charge on the bill. There is a directors and officers.
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
Just Elliot, little clarification. You talked about the district charity fund and the trustees. I just want to make it clear that just as he talked about a 501c3 and a 501c4, the trustees for the district charity fund are totally different than the trustees for the district. So in other words, a different set of overseeing, there's different offices for that. And actually a separate treasurer, it could be the same as a district treasurer, but it's also a different treasurer. So that's important that it's isolated from our district operating account.
I think there's something else I'd like to add, and that is, clubs have small activities, fundraising activities, also some big ones. And there comes a point where you ask the question, this big one that we're organizing, will the Rotary insurance in fact cover that? So I think what we have to do there is sort of go right back to Gallagher and ask them, is this covered? I mean, to give you an example, last year we started for the first time a 5K race that goes off into the Sturbridge Hills. We've got about 40 Sturbridge trails here. It turned out to be successful, so we're doing it again this year and hopefully subsequent years. But from the point of view of insurance, to what degree the club becomes liable, it's never totally clear. And I know that there comes a point where Gallagher will go and say, well, you're going to have additional coverage for that and pay for it. So I guess the message really is, if in doubt, go across to RI's insurance companies called Gallagher and, talk with them.
I just wanted to say, Elliot, the training was very helpful. I learned some new things, so really appreciate it. But I do have a question because our club is small. We're a 501c4, and we've been wanting to use QuickBooks. And, it costs us more being a 501c4 than if we were a C3. So I think we've asked this before of some other people, would it be possible to somehow write a letter, and get under the umbrella of district to get a better price on QuickBooks?
Well, I have no experience with that. What I've seen happen in a couple of clubs is they have members who might be an accountant or, in that business, and those members figure out a way to tag on the QuickBooks access to whatever they're doing. But I haven't seen a deal or discount from QuickBooks, other than I think they will give you a discount if you're a 501c3, but I don't think it's worth the effort just for that,
If I can just add a little bit comment to that, I'm June's husband. What we tried to do is we tried to go to a company called TechSoup, and they offer a very substantial discount on QuickBooks. I mean, it's like really something a small club like ours can afford for the online version where it can be accessed by more than one person. The problem is when they found we were a C4, they said, sorry, we can't do anything about it. And then so I asked about the fact that, for example, the church we belong to is also a C4, as most churches are. Okay, and what we found is through the church that if we went back to, for instance, the UCC, the local UCC in New England, we could get a letter from them that gave us the ability to piggyback on their C3 capability. And we were able to get, for instance, Google for nonprofits for the church, which would have cost us a fortune, but ended up being totally free. And when I mentioned that to TechSoup, they said, well, because you're RI and you've got a district, go to your district or to RI and see if you can get it through them, that same type of an agreement, and then we'll consider it. So we've been trying to do that. We mentioned it to our AG and haven't heard back. I guess he's having problems trying to find somebody to talk to that knows anything about it.
Mo, why don't you send us the contact information from TechSoup and let's see if we can ask a question and see what they need.
Okay, I can do that.
Okay.
Thanks.
I
Well,
had
if
the
it-
same thing, Canva, if you use Canva for doing your advertising things and flyers, they do have a 501c3 nonprofit. If you're 501c4, you don't get that price. So we'd be interested in the same thing as trying to piggyback on the district to get us access to that for free.
That's interesting. Yeah, Rotary, Big Rotary has a program where they've have partners with certain vendors. Zoom is one of them that where we get a 20% discount. We should also reach out to them and ask about that. I know Canva is one that a lot of clubs are using, so that would make sense. But
Yeah, so what you have to do is you have to send them proof of your 501c3. They said if you're a 501c4 that you don't qualify. So again, rolling up under district is helpful for such a large community. So
be an interesting thing to look at. The fear that I have is, even if we were able to use something like the district charitable funds tax ID to get access to these things, they're going to limit the number of subscribers that we can add. Canva's not going to give us a professional license and let us add 300 representatives to it. So
they do have different levels.
Do
So
they?
up to
Okay.
100 to, so there are different
Oh, okay.
levels of corporation size or so.
well, I think it's worth looking into if it's something that can help our clubs. No guarantees, but we can take a look.
Yeah, it's definitely worth it to the clubs.
I've got a question about the district method. Imagine we have a fundraising project and we're obviously looking for funds and donations. If we were to operate through the district foundation there, because it's a 501c3, doesn't that mean that every donation that say a business makes towards that particular project has to go directly to that particular district fund, right?
Yes, the checks are made out to the District 7910 Charity Fund. That's correct.
Got it. Thank you.
I think what we normally, what I've seen in the short time I've been associated with that end of things is normally the check will get written, as Jim said, to the district charity fund, and then in the subject line, it'll have the project, so Sturbridge scholarships or whatever the purpose is.
Yeah, I guess I would sort of be a little hesitant, but out of ignorance more than anything else. Obviously, if you have your own 501c3, you have total control within the club. Whereas once you get involved really with the district charitable fund, at that point, somebody else really at the district level determines whether they're going to pay out, etc. And I wonder just how responsive the district charitable fund treasurer is in making something like that happen when it comes time to pay out.
Well, what happens is from the beginning, the trustees of the District Charity Fund will vote on a motion to accept funds for a particular cause and to disperse upon request. Then what will happen when the money is ready to go out, we will get another motion coming in from the club that's asking us to hold their money. The trustees again vote on that motion to disperse the funds, and then the club, then we just send a check immediately to whatever source it's supposed to go to. There's really, it's not my discretion to, for instance, as district treasurer or district charity fund treasurer, as to cutting the check. The trustees vote on that. And the initial vote of the motion that accepts the fund and then says to disperse them is the document that says we have to release it to you.
Then it becomes a matter of timing. Do we wait a month for the board to go and vote on it? Yes, we're going to go and pay that.
So all those votes on things like that are done by email. And the only time if it's unanimous, in the 5 years or so that I've been involved with the District Charity Fund, I have never seen a motion that wasn't done unanimously through an email. So I don't think there's really an issue in that case.
Thanks, Jim.
You're welcome. Well, Elliot, I know no one's asking any questions, but
Yep.
just great job. Thank you very much. Very informative.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you,
Really
everybody, for
wonderful.
joining us. You know, questions as you go through your year and into your role, feel free. As I said, I'm not an accountant or a professional in this area, but you know, I know where to look. So if you have a question, let us know, and we're happy to do anything we can to support you and make you successful in the coming year ahead.